Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is in and ready to go. So bonjour tout le monde. My name is Sharon Squire, and I'm a member of the Ottawa Branch Board of Directors. And as always, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which the National Association of Federal Retirees is situated is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. On behalf of the branch, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, all about overcoming our health hurdles to stay active. And it's my pleasure to welcome our presenters, Meg Stickl Kroeker, owner of AIM Fitness, who I'm sure you've seen before, and our guest speaker, Allen Hicks. Allen is a registered physiotherapist, kinesiologist, and personal trainer. He holds credentials from both the Fellows of the Canadian Academy of Manipulative Physiotherapy and is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. Meg and Allen will inform us about several important topics, including dealing with nagging injuries, chronic pain, and how to stay active with arthritis and back pain. I know I'm most interested because I find at my age, coming back from injuries takes so much longer than before. Veuillez noter que le webinaire sera présenté en anglais, mais la participation bilingue est toujours encouragée. I would also like to welcome people on the webinar today who are not yet members of our association. We hope these webinars will inspire you to join us. And a warm welcome to our members. Our association has a lot to offer, including these webinars, and this is our third this week alone, not to mention all the other benefits of membership. So then back to our presentation. So in terms of process, there'll be a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. So please type your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session. As you'll note, the chat function has been disabled. And our presenters will answer your questions during the Q&A session. So now it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Meg and Allen. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sharon, for that lovely welcome. And I want to, just say thank you so much, Allen, for being here today as our guest speaker. So Allen and I connected a number of months ago. I do personal training, and one of my clients is a long-term follower of Allen. She's been working with him for a number of years, I believe more than a number of years. And I had the pleasure to join them in one of their sessions. So Allen, I'm really happy that you're here and you're here to share your expertise with everyone. So how we're going to handle today's session is I've put together a number of questions that I hear often from my clients, and I know many of you have asked these questions before. So we're going to go through our questions, and if you have additional questions that we didn't cover, please, like Sharon said, leave them right in the Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end of our session. All right, so first of all, Allen, let's jump right in. I know a lot of people I work with do have injuries from the past, and sometimes they come back. Sometimes, a bad knee that someone injured, years ago comes back. So what do you do when an injury comes back? What should you do?
That's a great question because it unfortunately does happen to all of us. And no matter how well we take care of ourselves, there's sometimes things that just crop back up. So whenever something, let's use the example of a knee injury, if that starts to bother you again, the best thing you can do initially is modify whatever activity you think might have caused it to creep back up. Maybe you've changed your activity pattern. Maybe you had a slip and fall that aggravated it. In that case, there's not much to change, but you just got to modify what you're doing in the short term. And then, as you know well, the biggest key things are if there's any swelling, you're trying to do some things to just treat that right away. So it might be some rest, might be some icing, some compression. If there's any loss of movement, that's always one of the first things we would look at is if your knee is no longer bending as well or straightening as well, then you need to get that back first. So improving that mobility, there might be some flexibility that needs to be addressed as well. So getting back to the regular stretching routines. Once the movement in the knee is well, then you want to really build the strength back up. So working on your stability, your balance, and then your strength, all the muscles around the knee, would be the next thing to do.
Okay.
And as you know, there's such a progression. Sometimes you'll work with a physiotherapist if there's something they're not sure what to do. But as things improve, then if they're already working with a health and fitness professional, then that could be where they go back to right away.
Mhm. Awesome. Now, I know there's some people who tend to avoid issues,
Yes.
yeah, and I won't name any names. But then there's other people who say, oh, my knee is bothering me. I've got to do something about it right away. So, is there a tipping point where you should, address the knee issue right away versus waiting it out? How do you know if you should be seeking, advice or help from a professional?
Yeah, it's a good question. Often what'll be the key deciding factor is how long does it stay sore for? If you have your knee get sore and a few days later it starts to feel better, then it's nothing too serious. But if you, especially if you have a serious injury, let's say you've fallen twisted or you slip on the stairs and bang it, then chances are if you're limping around or you have trouble even walking, you'll seek some healthcare professionals' advice, whether it's their physician or physiotherapist right away. If it's something that's just more of an overuse problem and it's, if you're seeing someone and they're saying, my knee's been sore now for 2 or 3 weeks and it's not getting better, then after 2 or 3 weeks, even though we're optimistic by nature, I would usually suggest to people if it's not improving in 2 or 3 weeks, you should certainly go and seek some professional help.
Okay, that's really helpful because I think a lot of people are wondering, is this a chronic condition or is this something that I do need to get help for? So that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's what I usually suggest to people is like 2 or 3 days. If it's something really serious, you don't want to wait any longer than that. But if it's something that's more minor, you could give it a couple weeks and see if it resolves on its own.
Okay, awesome. And do you have a patient story that you can share with us? Someone who has seen success by dealing with an issue?
Yeah, I'm lucky in my job. I get to see people every day that have success stories. Of course, they're initially here because something that happened that they didn't want brought them in. But yeah, so recently I was seeing this person. She's 63 years old, and she'd injured her knee actually chasing after a golf cart that was running away. One of those electronic golf caddies that carries her clubs, and the remote control no longer was controlling it because he got outside of that zone. So she started running across the course to chase after it. And I said, when was the last time you ran as fast as you could? She said, probably 20 years ago. So after that, her knee was really sore and she had a vacation planned to Portugal in 2 months. So she sort of fell in that category. She gave it a couple weeks and it really wasn't improving much. She was limping around. So she came in and said, I need to be better in 2.5 months for this trip. So we just worked a lot on all the things we discussed in the earlier question. First, getting her range of motion back because there was some stiffness in the knee. So when you can't straighten your knee properly, it's impossible to walk very well on it. So we worked on that. We worked on getting her strength back. Her walking started to improve quite consistently. And then just before she left on her trip, she was able to walk 10 kilometers a day, which is what she had hoped to do when she was in Portugal. So it was good. She eventually went on her trip and had a great vacation without her knee bothering her.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So nice
Those are
to
the
hear
nice things
those
about our
stories.
job, right? We get to see people that we're always seeing them at first for something that they wish didn't happen, but then by the end of things, they're back doing the things they want, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's really rewarding to be able to help people see those improvements. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so that's one side, which is dealing with an injury or a chronic pain. But what about something that people are dealing with day to day, like arthritis? I know I work with a lot of people who say, "Oh, I can tell that the weather is changing. My arthritis is worse." And they swear they know if it's going to rain because of that. So, the question is, and I think we both know the answer, we probably all know the answer to this, but tell us, how is it possible to stay active living with arthritis? And then the second part is, what kinds of arthritis do you see, and what's the best way to reduce pain and stiffness?
Well, I agree that I think everyone does. I think everyone knows this, but there's still always some legacy beliefs from years ago because there were times when the medical system almost told people that if you have arthritis and you do too much, you're going to wear things out, almost like a tire wearing out on a car. But it's actually the opposite is true. The more active we can stay with arthritis, the less likely our joints are to wear out. And to sit and rest and not use them is the worst thing for them. So that's always the first thing I always remind everyone of. Now, while you need to be really, really active, you have to make sure the activity is appropriate. If you're trying to do too much, then clearly that's not going to be a good thing. But trying to increase the amount of activity your body's doing gradually over a long period of time is the best thing for it. And we know that, again, all the research they've done on arthritis, there's been so much over the last few years. And the number one recommendation still from all the researchers is appropriate exercise is the best thing people can do if they already have arthritis. And it's one of the best things you can do to try to prevent the onset of arthritis or the progression of it.
Mm.
And the most common places, of course, we see arthritis are usually in the knees, the hips, the low back, the neck, and some people get it in their hands, especially if they've done a lot of hand work. So the types of arthritis I see, the most common by far is osteoarthritis. And osteoarthritis is something that it's almost inevitable that if we are lucky enough to have a really good, healthy, long life, most people develop osteoarthritis as they get older. It's just part of our normal aging process. And it doesn't always cause pain too. You might have arthritic changes that show up on an x-ray, but some people don't have any pain despite that, which is another reason why we know activity is really good for them. So that's the most common thing. I'll see people with osteoarthritis every day. Now, things that are a little more challenging, rheumatoid arthritis is more of a systemic problem, and usually people are diagnosed with that at an earlier age. So we'll see a few people with that, and there's a few more modifications that need to be made with that. Psoriatic arthritis is another less common form, but it falls under what they call a seronegative arthropathy. So that can be highly variable what joints it affects and how it impacts them. But certainly osteoarthritis is 98% of the people I see with arthritis, it's osteoarthritis.
Okay. Okay. So what would you advise them to do? Because, like you say, if you have arthritis, the best thing to do is move. And, I love the saying, use it or lose it. And I really think it really applies to this, so what would you say for people who are living with osteoarthritis or, are struggling? What should I do? What should I do to stay active?
Yeah, I'd say the number one thing would be to do some type of regular cardiovascular activity. So for a lot of people, that's just going to be walking. So as long as walking is fairly comfortable for them, and then just gradually building up that walking tolerance and capacity, week after week and month after month. But most people can usually start with a short 5 or 10 minute walk if they haven't been walking regularly. And especially as the weather gets better, it's easy to go out 2 or 3 times a day then. You go out for a walk in the morning. If 5 minutes is your limit, you come back, you rest. A few hours later, you go out for another walk, 5 minutes, rest. Maybe third time in the day, you go out for another 5 minute walk. So at least you're getting 15 minutes, but you're breaking it up in 5 minute increments. So for people that, if their knee or their back or something else is getting sore, then that can be a way to build up their walking tolerance. And then 5 minute walks turns into 3 10-minute walks a day. And those could all be done inside if the weather's not good as well. Other alternatives to walking would be stationary cycling if people have access to that. That could be another great thing for people that have some trouble with their knees or their backs. Swimming or aquafit are two other good options, but not everyone has access to a pool. But those are the ones that are, say, the most common. If people are really active and want to run, there's lots of people that still are jogging and running into their 60s and 70s. I see people that are playing tennis and downhill skiing in their 80s still, which is amazing. Cross-country skiing is another one that when we have snow, this winter wasn't a very good winter for cross-country skiing in Ottawa, but depending on where you live, that could be another nice activity and fairly easy on the joints too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you touched on, how you said 5 minutes, 5 minute walk in the morning, 5 minutes later on in the day. That's, something that I really believe too is important for people to know is that it doesn't have to be a full hour walk. It still counts, even if you break it down and go for shorter periods, whether it's exercising for smaller amounts of time just to get started or walking. And, I think still a lot of people think it has to count and it has to be long in order for it to be, valid. So
that's right. But you're right, just getting started is the key thing. You can always, as it gets easier, you can always progress it. And the same thing applies. That would be, if I was going to say the big three things with arthritis, some cardiovascular activity, regular walking, because we always know motion is lotion, no matter which form it is, would be number one. And then the second and third would be a lot of joint mobility. So just making sure that you're moving your joints through a full range of motion every day. So if you think about how many people don't lift their arms overhead. Right? So if I lift my arms up overhead, I have to consciously do that. But if I don't think about doing that in the day, I might reach up for a glass in the shelf for 5 seconds. I might get a pair of gloves off the shelf for 5 seconds. But the rest of the day, I'm not doing this at all. So over many months, your shoulders will get really stiff. So just going through these active movements, bending through your knees all the time, squatting down to tie your shoes. These are all things that we need to be doing every day. And if we're sitting in a chair most of the day, which is just the nature, of course, of what happens in life sometimes, especially as we get into an electronic age, we just need to get up and moving. So as you know well, because you lead a lot of these classes, any type of movement classes, whether it's yoga, whether it's Pilates, whether it's aquafit, just getting people moving their joints and reaching overhead and bending down and turning and rotating as well, because that's another thing we don't do much through the day is just twist through our shoulders and thoracic spine. So that would be the second big one. And again, it could be some pretty simple things, but it's just being aware and being conscious about moving all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third big one, and the more research they do on this, the more positive studies come out over and over again, and it's strength training. And the irony is, as we get older and we think, well, I'm not supposed to be as strong because I'm getting older, it's the most critical time in our lives to strength train. So the stronger we can get, because we're working against just the natural aging of our bodies, because we all start getting weaker basically from age 30 onwards, although it doesn't really affect us usually until we hit our 60s, we really start to notice a difference. But if we can strength train, and they've done all kinds of, I know you know this well, they've done studies in people in their 90s, and even people in their 90s can make gains doing a 6-week or 8-week strength training program.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the thing that matters most to almost everyone, I'm sure everyone listening to this will appreciate that. Everyone wants to stay independent. Everyone wants to have the best quality of life they can. And the number one reason why so many people lose their independence is a loss of strength. They just physically can't climb the stairs. They can't physically take care of themselves and do the things they want anymore. So strength training is a big part of that.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's so true. I've worked with people in their 90s, and I have one client who I started working with him when he was 100 years old.
That's
And
amazing.
and he saw improvements. And I talk a lot about Jack because, someone who just started to really get serious about exercising at 100 was able to go up the stairs more easily, was able to improve his balance and his strength. He lived alone. And it was incredible to see that, week after week, he exercised every day and was so dedicated. So, I do encourage people, based on that, if you start when you're younger, how much stronger you can be as you age. So yeah, I love that you talked about that.
Yeah, I had just a personal story. My grandmother, when she was 90, was having some pain in her shoulder. And I said, well, why don't you do some exercises to strengthen your shoulder? And she said, well, what's the point now? I'm already 90. Well, she lived for 20 more years. So,
Oh,
it
wow.
was nice to have her shoulder work pretty well for 20 more years. No one thought she'd live to be 110, but
Oh
there's
my
a good reason
gosh.
why you want to start strengthening your shoulder even when you're 90.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it improves your quality of life. That's what I see. Like you say, it's the independence, it's your quality of life, continuing on with your activities that you enjoy. Yeah, that's great. So let's shift on to another topic, back pain. I'm sure there's some people here today who are saying, oh, good, I'm glad you're covering this topic. So a lot of people do have back pain, and it can be different reasons. You'd mentioned already, we spend a lot of time sitting. This is kind of our lifestyle, whether people are in front of a screen most of the day or retired. And then there's other people who do have medical reasons that they have back pain. So can you talk a little bit about this topic?
Yes. And I see people with back pain every day, and it can be a huge impact on their lives. So what we see is certainly there's two main differences people get back pain. One will be where people have trouble bending forward because they're really stiff and they're just usually not as active. Tends to be people that have been, sitting for a long time. They get deconditioned. And as we talked about, maybe they don't have as much strength as they should. So for that population of people that just have sort of weak backs and are deconditioned, trying to just get them moving. And again, the regular walking is always, sometimes they'll wait months to go and see a back surgeon. And the first thing the back surgeon says is, why aren't you walking every day?
Hmm.
That's the number one thing they'll tell them. And then after that, they say, well, you should be doing some strength training too. Because most people don't end up being good surgical candidates. But in the meantime, they're getting more and more deconditioned, waiting for what they think is going to be a great solution to their back pain. And then the surgeon says, no, you're not a surgical candidate at all. So that would be one category of people. And then the second big one, and this just happens to all of us as we get older, it's part of the aging process, is we get more stenosis in our spines. And stenosis is just a fancy medical word for narrowing. So if we have, this much space, and then as we get older, we have this much space. And you sort of get narrowing in the outside where the nerves run out, what they call the intervertebral foramen, but also on the inside, the spinal cord, you can get some narrowing there as well. So typically the people that have that will experience more problems if they're standing for too long. They'll say, I can only stand for a few minutes, my back pain increases. Or I can only walk for so long, my back pain increases. But as soon as I sit down, it feels better. So they likely have, there can be other reasons, but stenosis would be the most common reason why that would affect them. So there's a lot of different things they can try to do. And a good alternative for many of them, if walking is too sore and they just have a limited tolerance, they can do what we talked about earlier, go for short walks, take frequent breaks, or walk in an area where there's benches that they can sit down every few minutes and open that space up if they know they have stenosis. Stationary cycling is usually really good for people like that because the space is always a little bit more open anyway. So they can usually ride a bike and say, I don't have any pain at all, it feels good. Again, swimming and aquafit can be other options for them as well. And then what we call flexion-based exercise, where they're doing things like getting into a child's pose or a prayer position, because when they really bend their spine forward, those spaces open up again and they feel some relief.
That's great. That's great. I work with a client and we walk her halls, and she has spinal stenosis. So she uses her walker. And when we started, we would do the halls about 3 times. And then that would be enough. That's all she would be able to do. And over the years, she's been able to do more. So now we're up to 10 times walking the halls.
That's amazing.
It's been gradual, but she's been able to notice, okay, yeah, I'm able to do it. She does have to lean forward slightly, and that she does find that helps. And then when we exercise, I'll do a standing exercise with her and then a seated, just to give her that, some relief for her back. So yeah, so it is good for people to hear that, okay, I can still exercise and it's still going to be beneficial for me, but it is good to be able to make adaptations during the workouts.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, awesome. So let's move on to another topic, and this happens, and I've been working, in the fitness world for a long time, and I've run into many people who've been exercising regularly, they've been doing so well, and then all of a sudden they have a medical setback. And that can be very discouraging for people when they've, made so many improvements. Their balance has gotten better, they feel stronger, they're into a really good routine, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they have to stop. So can you talk to us about medical setbacks and why is rest important? Or should we be pushing through and continuing with what we're doing?
It's a good question. It's definitely a little bit of both, but in the early stages, it's really important that we rest because our body needs the energy and the internal resources to help heal and recover from whatever that medical setback was. So that's always going to be, usually they'll hopefully have some medical advice that suggests that they do that. And in addition to the physical healing that'll usually take place after whatever the medical setback is, there's also a lot of focus needed on your mental and emotional health too, because when you have a medical setback, it doesn't just affect you physically, it affects you mentally and emotionally as well. That requires more energy too. Now, once you've gone through some of that needed rest and you start feeling a little bit better, then we know that getting back to some light activity is really helpful and important too. Because whenever they've studied it, years ago, they would recommend full bed rest for back pain. And then they realized that was terrible advice. They used to recommend bed rest or just complete rest if you had a concussion. They realized that was terrible advice. So every time in the past when they've recommended complete rest, they've realized that was terrible advice. So we know that people need to get up and start doing some little things as soon as they're really ready. And when people have major medical procedures like open heart surgery, I used to work in the cardiovascular intensive care units when I was younger in my career. And the first thing we did was go into people's intensive care room and get them up and walk the hallway with them. Same thing if you have a hip or knee replacement. The first thing they get you to do is you got to be able to walk around. a little bit before they'll send you home. But as I've done this over the last 20 years, it really sped up the recovery for people by getting them up and moving a little quicker, even though you think I just had like major surgery and you're going to get me up and want me to walk a little bit. And obviously we're not going to do too many laps, but it's all based on, how they feel and what's appropriate. So that's another big thing. After you go through that a bit of a rest period, you want to start getting up and moving around. And it could be very light and simple activity, but just trying to do that and gradually you build that up week after week.
Mm.
And the key thing is just pacing yourself. And that's why it really helps to work with someone that can give them that specific individual advice, because it's how they progress, and it's going to depend so much on what was their health like before that medical procedure or medical setback. How serious was it? And that'll vary with how they recover. But the one thing I always tell everyone is none of us want to experience these setbacks, but the healthier you are and the more active you are before you have a medical setback, you're going to rebound and recover faster. So even though you think, oh, I've been doing all this healthy strength training and cardiovascular training, and I still had this setback, whatever it was, I said, well, you're still going to benefit from that because it'll help you recover better afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was really inspired recently because one of the ladies who is part of my classes, she injured her hip. It was really bothering her. It was an old injury that flared up. But she was determined. She was in that routine of exercising regularly. So she said, Meg, I've been doing these seated exercises and I've been still strengthening my upper body. I'm using weights and I'm still strengthening my shoulders, my arms, my core, even if I can't stand right now. And I thought, wow, isn't that inspiring? Because I think a lot of time we do hear people say, oh, this happened, I can't do anything. And, that's not true. So I think it's really important for us to know that, okay, even if one part of your body isn't working that well, don't stop your exercise routine completely, because it's going to be so much harder to restart. And also you will lose a lot of that strength you've built. So it really is about adapting. And like you said, it's really important to work with someone, a professional or someone who can guide you on what's safe to do, what's not. Because there are times, like you say, where people should just rest, and that's what your body really requires. But I really think it can be that balance too of not just stopping because your fingers are bothering you today. It's easy to come up with excuses too.
You're absolutely right. That's what's nice about having that professional advice is there's almost always something you can start doing right away on an area of the body that doesn't necessarily need that rest.
That's right. That's right. All right, so we're going to hit up the Q&A. We've got some questions here in the chat. So I've got 3 questions, and if anyone else has a question, please feel free to ask. So the first question is, just clarifying. So when you said the child's pose, can you tell us a bit more of what that looks like?
Sure. I could actually do a quick demonstration here.
Okay, perfect.
So, well, some people will call it a prayer position as well, but you just have your arms out in front of you. And again, this is where it depends on how flexible you are. Some people just go back a little ways, depending on their hips and knees. And if you're comfortable, you can sit back where your hips are going right to your heels and let your head rest down. And just stretch into that position.
That's great. And you can do that on the floor. I know some people who don't like going down on the floor, so you can do it right in bed. And that's
exactly. That's why I did it sort of up on our bench too, because it's a little easier for some people to do it on their bed than have to get up and down from the floor.
Yes, yeah, awesome. Thanks for demonstrating that. All right.
I always tell people too, you can even do a sitting version where I'm sitting at my desk, but I could just have my hands out in front of me at the kitchen table and then slide the chair back, and you're doing something very similar for your back anyway and shoulders.
Oh, that's a great idea. So our next question is, after how much physio do I ask my doctor to investigate a shoulder injury rotator cuff, which continues to have pain?
Good question. So that one I can give a pretty specific answer. Now, usually they would say at least 12 weeks of rehab because the shoulders tend to be really slow to recover. And I will say one other key thing with qualifier would be the physiotherapy should always include a really good progressive strength training program. But they found that you really need to do sometimes these strength training programs on the shoulder for 12 weeks before you start seeing some positive changes. But if it's been 12 weeks and you've been doing good rehab and it hasn't changed, then I think it's appropriate to go back and see your physician about some imaging for it.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's good to know. Good to know that it does take a bit longer. All right. Another question. This individual has severe osteoporosis. Can exercise help them improve the amount of pain in their back?
Good question. We would certainly hope that it would, and it would be the most recommended thing to initially try if it hasn't been done. Now, if there's severe osteoporosis, the exercise will need to be carefully prescribed to take that into account, because usually what I just showed you with the prayer or child's pose position, sometimes with severe osteoporosis, we might not want people to go into this really extreme bend position. Depends how vulnerable some of their vertebrae are, but trying to do some more static postures where maybe you would just do it in a sitting or standing position and just doing some isometric. Again, Meg, you could guide them very well on that, but just doing some more isometric type work, which is a lot safer on their spines at first.
Awesome. All right, our next question is, what is your opinion of including Robaxacet or Voltaren for chronic stiffness in neck?
I actually don't have an opinion on that. Because medication prescription has never been part of physiotherapist's scope of practice, I've refrained from advising anyone on anything related to medication. I would always suggest they talk to their physician or pharmacist about it.
Awesome. Yep, agreed. Okay, the next question. This individual has struggled with migraines, which sometimes appear to be triggered by certain exercises. What should they do about that?
If they do feel that the migraines are triggered by exercise, I would make a log of that, keep that list, and then when they see a medical professional, let them know which exercises they feel trigger it, and then they would try to see if it's related to possibly the stress on their neck or their neck position. There could be so many different causes of migraines, but definitely sometimes they can be triggered by the neck. So if there's something about their exercise that's aggravating their neck posture position, that would be the first thing to look at from a biomechanical standpoint.
Okay, good. All right, so back to the osteoarthritis. This person is wondering, how many times a week in minutes should one walk?
Well, that's highly individual, but if you're feeling good, then if you can start walking more and more, that's ideal. I always tell people you want to feel like you've challenged yourself. So if you've got some osteoporosis and you're walking 60 minutes a day and that's appropriate and feels good on your body, on your back, your knees, then that's great. Some people it might be 20 minutes. And one thing I'll say, which I know is really, really important, is I always tell people that walking is good, but walking won't drastically change your bone density. If you, like, for example, if you're going to walk for 60 minutes instead of 30, I don't think that's going to have much of an impact on your bone density with osteoporosis. What would be better is to maybe take some of that walking time and devote it to more strength training or something that's going to put a little more load on the bones.
Yeah, that's good. All right, we got two more questions, so we'll wrap it up after these two. So this individual says, I attended chair exercise and aqua fitness offered in my apartment complex. I moved and now use YouTube videos, but I lack motivation and will make excuses to delay exercising. What can I do to increase motivation?
Extremely common. I'm glad that question came up. So there's two big things. Both of them involve just other people, because so many times we're much more motivated socially. So finding a group of people to exercise with, and the group could just be one other person that you can be each other's conscience. And then of course the other big thing is to work with someone that's a trained professional personal trainer like yourself, Meg, because having that guided expertise also gives you the confidence to get back doing those things and the motivation. That's a big important piece. And then sometimes people need to work with an individual trainer for, sometimes it's a few months, right, before they really feel like they're ready to do it on their own. Or maybe they work with a trainer for 1 or 2 days a week, but then they start doing more things on their own 2 or 3 days a week as well. And then it becomes such a big positive.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think, doing it with other people can really be positive. So if you find that you are motivated in a group, often people say, okay, I'm paying money for this, so I'm going to show up. So often when we're financially invested too, we're more
That's
likely to
true.
do it.
That has, and
Yeah.
when scheduled, right? When you know you have a class or a training session at a certain time, people usually show up and do it. But if it's up to you to do it whenever you feel like it, somehow we don't find time despite having all day to do it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So the accountability can work well, even if you say, all right, let's do this YouTube video, and you tell your neighbor, let's do it today, and then we'll check in afterwards, see how we're feeling. That can really help. Yeah. All right. Oh, that's a great question. All right. And then there is not a question, but an affirmation. This is from Carmen. When I experienced both medical and exercise injuries, the recommendations you made, Allen, have helped me recover fully. The AIM fitness program emphasizes strength, flexibility, and this is invaluable. So thank you, Carmen.
Awesome.
Carmen is one of my AIM Fitness online members, and she has definitely shared her own journey with the other members of having medical setbacks. So Carmen, I'm glad that you shared that. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
That's
All right.
fantastic.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Allen. Thank you for sharing. I feel like we've just been sitting by the fireplace and chit-chatting and being able to just hear your expertise has been so helpful. So I want to thank
Well,
you
thanks
so
for
much.
inviting me to be part of your presentation. I think it's so powerful and so important because again, I don't know anyone, I've never met anyone in my life that doesn't want to have improved quality of life.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I encourage everyone, don't leave yet. I am going to be leading you through a few exercises, some seated and standing stretches, and this will be really beneficial. So we can put what we've talked about into practice, and I'll be sharing some motivation tips as well. All right, so thank you again, Allen.
Thanks, Meg.
Yeah,
Enjoy the
thank you so
stretching
much.
now.
This was amazing.
Sure. Have a good morning. Bye.
Yeah, take care. All right, so if you've been sitting, you've been relaxing like me for a while, we're going to be standing. We're going to start with a few standing stretches just to get moving. So I'm going to just adjust my screen here. I encourage you to stand. All right, so we'll move the chairs out of the way. All right. All right, excellent. So I encourage you to have a little bit of space around you. You don't need very much space, but we're going to start by stepping side to side, circling our shoulders backwards. All right, so it is really good to move, and I love all of this advice that Allen shared with us today. And I would encourage you to start thinking about how you can move a little bit more during the day. And I'll be having you move. We'll do about 10-15 minutes of movement, just something to get you thinking about how it's possible to do this more. All right, so from here, we're going to take your legs nice and wide. So your feet should be wider than your hips. And we're going to be shifting our weight from one side to the other. Now you can choose to have your hands on your hips or keep a chair close by if you need to hold on. And then the other option here is to reach those arms, swinging those arms from side to side. Okay, good. So what you should notice here is that as we're shifting from one leg to the other, you should feel a stretch right in that inner thigh, stretching into the hips as well. So option one is keeping those feet flat on the floor. Option two is lifting the heel. So as you're shifting to the side, let's lift. And I encourage you to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. All right, very good. Let's do 3 more per side. 2. And 1. All right, very good. Now we're going to reposition. So we're going to have one leg behind, one leg in front, and we're going to be swinging those arms, reaching front and back. So lifting the heel and then lifting the toes. All right, so this is a really nice way to stretch into the legs as well. Now, as you're lifting your toes from the floor, you should feel that in the back of the leg. All right, so option one, I'm going to give you options so you can choose what feels best for you today. But option one is continuing with what we're doing. Option two, we're going to be lifting and raising up and then pressing back, reaching behind you. So lift up, lift that back heel, and then lift the front toe, press back. Inhale and exhale. So you should feel a bit more of a stretch in the back, especially as we're lifting, and then really feel that stretch in the back of the leg. Now, if you need to, use a chair. Want to make sure that we feel safe as we're moving. Very good. Let's do 3 and 2. Good. And 1. Very good. All right, we're going to change legs. Opposite foot in front, opposite leg behind, starting with the nice and easy heel lift, toe lift. Now, something else we can think about here is activating that core, so tightening up your stomach. Breathing in, breathing out. All right, and then the option number 2 is to go a little bit deeper, lifting, and then pressing the arms back. Lift that toe. Inhale and exhale. Now you may have one side that seems a little bit tighter or a little more awkward. That's very normal to have one side that is stronger than the other or even more flexible than the other. So move accordingly. Let's do 3. Good, press back, lift the toe. 2 and 1. All right, very good. Let's bring those feet in together. We're going to do a nice easy march on the spot. Arms at your side. And just notice how those legs are feeling. Very good. All right, so we are going to work on our shoulders next. Let's bring our hands right to your shoulders. And we're going to bring those elbows in, tap if you can, and then take those arms and elbows as far back as you can go. So we're breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. All right, awesome. Now I do want to touch a bit more on motivation. I love that question, so thank you for asking. Something that I find has really helped a lot of my clients is the whole concept of habit stacking. As you probably know, motivation comes and goes. You may have some days where you feel really motivated to exercise, other days where you just do not want to do it. Your body doesn't want to either. So that is normal. But I find people who are the most successful are the ones who make exercise part of their lifestyle and it just becomes a habit. All right, from here, we'll do some circles. So elbows up and back, up and back. So the whole concept of habit stacking is where you do something every day, and that's normal. You don't have to think about it, you just do it. So we have a lot of things like that. Brushing your teeth, making your bed, putting on a cup or mug of coffee. Maybe it's to go check the mail. Maybe it is to go outside for a walk every day. But whatever that thing is that you do every day, that's where we want to add to it. We want to habit stack. All right, here's the next one for posture. Arms in front, bend the elbows and squeeze back. So this is a really good one for back strength. Stretch and really promote better posture. And a note for this one is don't have those shoulders and elbows come up, but really think about lowering and squeezing back. So what can we do to habit stack? So think about what is it that you do every single day. So for me, I make my bed every day. So after I make my bed, the next thing I can do is I can do 10 minutes of stretching. and I can add that new habit onto something I'm already doing. So you can think about your own life, your own habits, and your own morning routines. What is something that you're doing? What's something that you want to add in? So maybe it is stretching. Maybe you are feeling motivated after today and you think, you know what, I've got something holding me back, but I can go for a 5-minute walk. Or you know what, I can do a YouTube video, or I can sign up for a class. I just have to do it. So I do encourage you today to take action on what it is you want to do. All right, this is so good. Let's do 2 more of these. Excellent. And 1. All right, awesome. So let's move to the chair. Have a seat. All right, so you can sit right down on your chair. We're going to stretch into the back of the legs. The back of our bodies tend to get really tight. So let's start by taking one leg right out front, nice and straight. So your heel is on the floor, your toe is lifted up. We're going to be leaning over and stretching into the back of the leg 10 times. So we're also going to work into that shoulder. So let's bring your arm back like you're about to throw a ball. And then we'll hinge from the hips and lean over. Now, someone did mention osteoporosis, so I do want to say if you have osteo, just go about halfway. Keep that spine straight. You'll still feel this in the back of the leg. If you don't have osteoporosis, you can round your back a little bit to reach a little further if you want. All right, so reaching, aiming for that toe, but don't feel like you've got to touch it. The main focus here is stretching into the back of the leg. All right, so let's do 5 more. So reach and aim for that toe. Now, a lot of people do find that they can go a little further as the leg warms up, as you stretch a bit deeper. Good, let's do 2 more here. Good, and 1. Now hold it here and just notice, can you reach a little further than when you started? Great, excellent. Good, let's do that other side. So same thing, lengthen the leg, lift the toe, and let's bring that arm back and then lean and reach. And so we'll do this 10 times. This is 2. Focus on that breathing. So in through your nose, out through your mouth. Good. And something to pay attention to as we're stretching is how you're feeling. So there is the mental benefit too of exercising. There's more blood flow to the brain. We feel good about what we're doing. And your body, your muscles probably feel a little more stretched out too. Pay attention to all those things, because that in itself can really lead to motivation when you feel like, okay, I'm doing something, it's making a difference, I feel good. All right, so hold it here and just notice, can you go any further than when you started? All right, excellent. Good, so let's bring those feet together, knees together, and then we'll take your knees out and in. This is a good stretch for the outer thigh, for the hips. Good. And then as we do this one, let's circle our shoulders backwards. All right, very good. Now, another piece of advice I find that's really helpful, especially if you find you do spend a lot of time sitting, is to use your device. Set an alarm on your phone to go off a few times a day, and this is your reminder to move. This is your reminder to either get up, walk around the house, maybe refill your water, or this is to do some stretches like we're doing right now. It's easy just to sit, to focus on what we're doing and kind of block everything else out. But I do find that I'm more focused when I get up and when I move. I'm sure you'll notice that too. All right, so another one that we're going to do now to really stretch into the back is a twist. Now, if you have osteoporosis, we're going to use your arms and just push very gently against your chair or against your hip. but we're not doing too much of a twisting motion. We really want to protect your spine. Now, if you don't have osteoporosis, you can twist. So think about bringing your belly button towards the corner of the room, and then you push into that leg, into that chair to hold this position. Now also think about really lengthening your spine. So not rounding and twisting, but really thinking about sitting as tall as you can, balancing a book on your head, and then holding it here. Let's breathe in and out. And it's right in that spine that you should feel just a little bit of a nice stretch. This can give you some relief if you're feeling tight. Good, 2 more deep breaths. And 1. All right, we'll do the other side. Good, before we hold it though, I want you to just do a nice easy twist, just stretch that out. All right, move to the other side, osteoporosis, focus more on the arms, and you can look over your shoulder. Other option is twisting and holding it. Good. And then let's release. Awesome. All right, so we're going to do one more standing stretch. I want to just demonstrate what Allen was talking about earlier with the child's pose, because there's a few different options you can do. So I'll just show you using the back of your chair. I encourage you to try this as well. So what you can do is hold on to the back of your chair, walk your feet away, and then holding on, lengthen that spine, lengthen that back. So you'll notice I'm not rounding, I'm not arching, but I'm doing my best to have a straight spine. Okay. So hold it here. And this can really help lengthen the back, lengthen your spine, create that space. So if you do have spinal stenosis, this can be a really nice stretch to do after a walk or after some standing exercises. Good. Now the other option here, and to come out of this, you'll want to walk your feet in, straighten. The other option is to take it a little bit lower towards that seat. So you can do that same thing. Walk those feet back. You won't have to go quite as far back. And then make sure you've got a good grip. And bring those hips back. Keep that back nice and straight. And then hold it here. So I would say do a few deep breaths. You feel this also in the back of the legs, which feels really nice. Relax your neck. Good. And then come on in. Walk back in. All right. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to finish up with a few stretches for the neck. Last few minutes. Let's bring one ear towards that shoulder. So you're stretching into this side of the neck. And then with this arm, we're going to be pressing away, pressing towards the floor, lifting your fingers. And notice that stretch right up the side of your neck. Take a few deep breaths. Good. And using your other hand, you can lift your head slowly. Let's do the other side. Ear towards shoulder, and then angling the fingers. Pressing away. Feeling it down this side. Very good. Now we're going to change the position of our head this time, looking towards your armpit. So still leaning towards one side, but looking down, you can say towards the armpit or towards your thigh. And this will hit not only the side of the neck, but also the back as well. So let's hold it here. Good. Breathing in and out, not overdoing it. So if it's too much, release. And then again, using that hand, help your head to come on up. It feels heavy after that one. And then other side. So start by bringing your ear to the shoulder and then looking down towards that thigh. Lift the hand. The lower you look, the more you'll feel it in the back of the neck. Find a good spot, a spot that feels good for you, and let's take 3 more deep breaths. And all right, and then come on up. All right, amazing. So let's finish up with some breathing. Let's bring your arms out to the side. Inhale and exhale. And again, breathing in and out. Notice how you are feeling. Notice how you're doing. You all did such a great job today. Thank you so much for joining me for these stretches. Awesome. Now, if you are looking for motivation, you're looking for some support, do reach out. I offer a free 15-minute health consultation. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have and tell you about our programs, including the AIM Fitness Online membership, where you all as members get 33% off. So be sure to reach out if you have any questions at all. All right, thanks everybody, and I'll pass it over to you, Sharon.
Thank you. And thank you very much for all those stretches. I know my neck is thanking you already. And I love the concept of habit stacking. I think that's a really exciting thing to try out. And to Allen, thank you so much as well. I know he's gone, but for me, strength training is an important takeaway as well. I love the phrase lotion is motion or motion's lotion. Yeah, that's motion is lotion. So that's really great takeaways for me. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar. And thank you again, Meg and Allen, for your excellent presentation. It's greatly appreciated. Remember to watch for our follow-up email that will give you a recording of today's event, as well as contacts for Meg, etc. And also, please, if you'd like, feel free to invite non-members to our upcoming webinars so they can see the good work that we do. And to register for upcoming webinars, just go to our website and there'll be lots of information there. So once again, on behalf of the Ottawa chapter, thank you, Meg, thank you, Allen, and thank you for attending today's session today. Bonne journée.